So folks, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And the topic of interest today is learning what a command country manager does. So we've got three experts from the Air Force Security Assistance and Cooperation Directorate, AFSAC, otherwise known. And so we're going to meet them to get our conversation started. And we will start with John. Introduce yourself, give us a little of your career background.
Hi, my name is John Harrington. I'm the Command Country Manager for Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Brunei, Timor-Leste, and a couple others. I've been doing this for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I did 24 years doing public affairs, 20 years active duty in the Navy, and 4 with the Air Force. When I decided I wanted a new challenge and change, and came over to the AFSAC and have loved it ever since.
Sounds good. And Mary?
My name is Mary Lisa Koogler. I have been working at AFSAC for a little over 8 years, and I have the South America countries. My main countries are Ecuador, Brazil, and Argentina, and a few other countries in South America. And before that, I was in the acquisition world working a C-17 program. I was also a CAG. In the CAG at the Agile Combat Wing, and I also worked at the T6 program, and then I moved over to AFSAC.
Cool, thanks, and welcome. Lieutenant.
Hi, so my name is Lieutenant Lucas Tung. This is actually my first assignment. I've been working at AFSAC for about 2 years now, a little over 2 years. And so I graduated from Air Force ROTC out of University of California, Berkeley, and they assigned me as a 6-3 acquisitions officer, and then put me here at AFSAC as my first assignment. And so it's been really interesting because I definitely didn't expect to get a position like this. Granted, I wasn't really expecting anything because I didn't know anything about anything. But it's been a really good experience so far.
All right. Well, thanks. And again, welcome to everybody. So let's get right into the conversation. We're going to start off. John, can you explain to us what is a command country manager?
Okay, so in a nutshell, a command country manager is a person who manages all U.S. Air Force foreign military sales for a particular partner nation. We coordinate with all levels, including the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, Secretary of the Air Force International Affairs, ODCs, the embassy personnel. We coordinate with all the various program offices, anybody who's impacted by trying to provide a requirement to the partner nation. We facilitate all of it.
Okay, cool. So Mary, you mentioned that you've been a program manager before. Can you tell us what's the difference between a program manager, like in a regular acquisition office, and a command country manager?
Well, when I was a program manager over at the T6 program, we're assigned specific platforms. So I was in the T6 platform, and we have an IPT, which the program managers partners with either the engineers for development of a platform or a development of an item that will go on a U.S. Air Force aircraft. And then for sustainment, we rely on our logistics folks to help us sustain the aircraft as things go out of production. Then we work with them to design things for the aircraft. What a command country manager does at AFSAC is we partner with everybody. We're more broad than a specific program office. We as John mentioned, we deal with the security cooperation officers down at the embassies to develop requirements for the program if they want to buy a new platform or whatnot. Then we go to the actual program offices to help develop a particular need for the country. So if they're looking for a T6, we'll go to the T6 program office and work with the SAPMs over there, and we are the middleman and the person who helps go from a letter of request to a letter of acceptance, which is a contract with the Air Force. So there's a very big difference there because of the limited people that we work with here at AFSAC. We're like more of a one-man show, and we have tentacles that go out to everybody. In a program office, you look at your IPTs, your team, for their expertise. So we kind of rally. We're the ralliers for the partner nation.
Okay, all right. Now, Lieutenant, you said that this was your first assignment. So you're kind of, I guess, on one hand, learning what a traditional acquisition looks like, but also serving as a country manager at the same time. How is that process?
It's definitely been a whirlwind process. I think that the typical metaphor that people use when you start learning is a very fire hose process of a lot of information. And so the Air Force had initially sent me to Fundamentals of Acquisition Management, FAM 104, the basic like acquisitions management course. Not really any of that applied to what we do at AFSAC. So the typical like work processes are very different from standard things in normal program offices. And so that was a bit of a challenge, sort of coming into the job, not feeling like any of the sort of like preliminary like education that I had received on acquisitions was applicable. Um, but it definitely has been a really good experience to get a sort of view from a top level of how all the other different program offices work. So as
Yeah.
opposed to starting right out the gate in a single program office, I get to interact with whatever program offices are associated with the country teams that I work. So I'm the CCM for Italy and I support Norway as well. And so between all of the different platforms that the two countries may have, I might get to interact with the C-130 office, the MQ-9 office, F-16 office, F-22, etc. So it definitely doesn't feel like I get a lot of very focused proficiency, but I get a broad view of how a lot of the different program offices operate.
Mhm. And how have you kind of looked to satisfy that training requirement? Have you just sought out mentors or kind of done a lot of OJT?
I think a big part of the job is OJT. So part of the challenge of starting at a job as my first assignment and my first duty station in the Air Force was I was initially trying to get spun up with all the things I needed to get started at AFSAC, while also waiting for all of my accesses for things I needed to start in the Air Force as well. So I think I spent my first month at AFSAC just sort of sitting around reading through all the manuals. And so there's this huge security assistance manual, the green book that we refer to it by. I had the time to literally read it cover to cover. None of it really made any sense. That didn't compare to like a week of working on the job with another coworker of mine. So I think a lot of it really is on the job training. It's very varied as far as the issues that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, which makes it exciting because it's kind of different problems all the time.
Okay.
So definitely
Hey,
working,
hey, Daryl.
on the job with mentors is a big part.
Yes, go ahead.
One thing to add, one thing to add to the gentleman is that it is so unique that we actually have a new congressionally mandated requirement for training for us.
Right.
Besides the normal DAWIA training for acquisitions, we now have to do the security cooperation and workforce development training. So that's one of the ways that we get spun up. I wish we had it a couple years ago when I first started because it's actually very, very good. I've completed basic and in the middle of intermediate now, and it's very, very good. Sir, if you haven't already signed up for those, I would highly encourage you to do that. So it is so unique that we have two different certifications that we have to have in order to do this job.
Okay. All right. And so let's get into that kind of unique aspect of it. Mary mentioned it and the lieutenant mentioned as well, John, and if you could just address this holistic approach. Okay. So like a lot of times in program offices, you're working on one particular program and you're kind of focused in on that thing. Okay. Where AFSAC is a more broad, more overview. So talk to us a little bit about that, kind of this holistic approach to the system. John, if you could.
It is extremely relationship based. I mean, as CCMs, we've got a first lieutenant. I'm a GS-12. I'm not sure what Mary is. We're not high-ranking people. We have no authority over pretty much anybody. So everything you get accomplished is purely because of the relationship that you build and everyone's focus on getting the mission completed. So, and the things we do, so we work with program offices, we work with the country, we work with, the DSEA and SAF-IA because there are rules, policies, requirements. Every country is different in regards to how they receive their materials, to how they pay for their materials. We've got different kinds of funding. We've got Section 333 cases, which is where the U.S. government provides a service or material to the country. We have FMF, which is where it's basically like we give them a gift certificate, for an analogy. Here's a certain amount of money, you determine what you want to use it on. And then you have FMS, where they use their national funds to procure what they're what they're asking for. All those things have different processes and have different procedures in them. And sir, if you haven't heard the term "it depends" yet, you will, because regardless of what the SAM says or what happened on a prior case, every single situation is different. And it comes down to us primarily to figure out how to get around those challenges so that ultimately we can award these LOAs within the time prescribed and get the partner nation the requirements they need when they need them.
And if I can piggyback on what he said, we also we do a lot of help with the country, like for repair and returns, where we have to rely on other folks for repair and return. We have to drop requisitions for countries depending on how developed the country is in their way of doing business. You know, some people don't have internet, some people don't have. So each country is very unique in the fact that we, the CCMs, do everything for them. And we also have what we call the flow offices, foreign liaison offices here. We're responsible for making sure that they're here on a case so they can stay here in the country. We do all the paperwork for that. So not only do we provide goods and services for the country, but we are there as their mentors when they get here, and we work closely with those foreign liaison officers who are here at RIPAT or at another base to make sure that they are getting what they need as well, and they can communicate back to their embassies or their countries. So we're the help, if you will. So it's very unique for every country on how it works.
And just to add some detail to that, when you look at, we have different types of cases, right? System, aircraft sales and sustainment, things like that. Some of these cases, each thing has line items on it, and each line provides for a particular service or material or something like that. Have to coordinate and manage all that, sustain all that. So not only are you working on the new stuff, you're working on closing out old lines that have been used. You're looking at, okay, what's going to be coming up and expiring soon? Does the program office and country need those services to continue? Do we need to work to get an LOR from country to ask us to do that? How much is it going to cost? So it's a nonstop process, and especially with those with multiple countries, now you have competing priorities. So it's definitely juggling a lot at once and really relying on the entire team, including one another, because as you know, Daryl, coming from EA, I knew nothing coming here. If it wasn't for people like Mary and Scott Lambden and some other CCMs who I just pinged repeatedly with question after question after question, I wouldn't know what I'm doing right now. So everybody, it's very much a team effort.
Okay. Lieutenant, if you could talk a little bit about kind of what the role is in the whole acquisitions process.
Sure. So the command country manager, or CCM for short, essentially is the focus point between the foreign partner and the program offices. So in the acquisitions process, there is the first step of it really is the foreign partner submitting a letter of request for some good or services that they're looking to acquire. And so the CCM team at AFSAC will process that and make sure that it's actionable, that the items are releasable to foreign partners, and get all of that ready. And so that's the first step before the program office even can start any work on what they're doing. So as for like a prototypical example for let's say like Norway is trying to buy a C-130 aircraft. So they'll submit a letter of request to us at AFSAC, and we'll process that, look over the requirements, make sure all the waivers and congressional notification and all of the case administration side of that is in check. And so we'll process that, gather the data from the program office to make sure that we can put the pricing forward to a point where eventually we provide a letter of offer and acceptance to the foreign partner. And that will include things like saying, here is what you're requesting, here's how much it's going to cost, here's how much of the equipment breakdown line by line. Once the foreign partner accepts and signs that and returns it to us, then we can use that to give to the program office so they can start their work. And that's when the acquisitions process on the US government side for them to begin development of the actual aircraft begins. And so it sort of provides a sort of top level administrative cover to sort of help and facilitate that request from foreign partner wanting a piece of equipment to allow the US government office to actually start working on that.
Okay. Now you mentioned line by line, so that goes back to what John was just talking about, right? Where you're looking at, they want to buy an aircraft, but it's not just an aircraft. They also need spare parts. They also need training systems. They need maybe training on how to fly the thing. They need training on how to fix it. All of those things as well, correct?
Correct. And that's a big part of FMS and how that differs from direct commercial sale. So in theory, foreign partners also have the option to buy from the manufacturer directly. However, they don't benefit from the US government support of that effort, which includes things like training and the whole sort of total package approach is what we call it typically. And so that's where the foreign partner can get that benefit by buying through the US government as opposed from the vendor directly, because we take that into consideration, things like training, in addition to some assets and parts being only releasable by the government because of security reasons. But yes, so we also factor that in as well as the total package approach. And that requires additional coordination. So we may have to reach out to AFSAT, the Air Force Security Assistance and Training Directorate. And that's just another element of the many different things that we sort of juggle and coordinate on at the CCM level.
Okay. And so
First,
when
I stand is correct on that. The SAM dictates that we have to use total package approach. So we would have to get a deviation to move away from that, and that's often a topic of conversation with countries because they look at DCS and the price is invariably a lot cheaper because it doesn't include all those sorts of things. So that's upon us and DSCA and SAFIA to communicate to them exactly what they're getting. And also, with the U.S. government, we have intense buying power just because we buy so much of these things. So economy of scale and the like.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we should probably talk a little bit about that, just the funding of things. So AFSAC operates at no expense to the U.S. taxpayer. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I mean, all of your actions are funded by the countries via a surcharge that's on the case.
Right, you have admin funded personnel and then you have case funded personnel. Admin funded are people who are paid from that surcharge you're talking about. Case funded is the country there's a standard level of service that we can provide with the manpower that we have. They can opt to pay additional fees and funds to get additional positions, and those would be case funded. Those people's salaries would be tied directly to a case.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, ultimately, this is a service that we provide for the countries, but the countries pay for this service.
That is correct.
FMS.
Yeah. Well, we have FMF, we have FMS, and we have what he calls the 333. I'm very lucky that that my countries fund their own cases. So that's another unique thing, is that we have to take into account the country's financial status. So we monitor that and we help them to if they say, I only want to spend this amount of money, we only spend this amount of money. And then as those cases develop or move along in the process, they can add money to the case. We have what we call unique payment schedules. If they want to say, hey, I need this now, but can we stretch it out for so many years so they can get the more bang for their buck? So I think that with how the CCM is tied to money, we have to keep the country in mind. And so we work with the program offices to make sure they're getting the cost at a fair and reasonable cost, which when we go out, say for instance, they want to buy something that's not a unique to the Air Force. So we go out to what we call a bid board, and we ask for the country, we ask for the country, hey, can somebody make this part? All right. And then the AFSAC community, we call it the pros office, they will get a bids on things, and they only will accept a fair and reasonable cost. So we also ask the country, hey, this is what we have for you. This is how long it's going to be to get, and this is how much it's going to cost. And the country has the ability to say yay or nay. So that is a wonderful thing about that, is that the country determines whether they want the item at that cost. So that's a good thing. So we always keep that in mind, money for them.
So ultimately, the whole idea of foreign military sales is that it helps the Air Force. Okay, it promotes global stability. All right, it makes us stronger through the use of our interoperable partners. So from a personal fulfillment kind of standpoint, what do you find is the most interesting part of being involved in this process? Or maybe even an example of something that you feel like, wow, we really advanced the ball in this instance, or we really kind of overcame a hurdle. So kind of give us an example of that. And John, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay, so my computer is a little bit wonky, so it's telling me it wants to shut down Windows, but I'm not going to do that right now. So I only half heard what you said, but I think you're on to the part of what's the most interesting part about being a CCM.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, one of it is worldwide visibility, and you don't notice this until you're in AFSAC, but when you're at home and you listen to the news and you hear about some sort of international deal where the U.S. government has reached a deal with a foreign nation to sell them airplanes. That's somebody I work with. There's somebody in that building who did that. And that's amazing to me. I don't care if anybody else knows it, but I mean, I know what went into that headline. And from working together that I'm very operationally driven. I have a very long history of working for our country. I love our country. I feel this sort of service is the best thing I can do with my life. And so it's great to see that. And you see it, the daily impact on what we do, from the different materials that we get for these nations so they can fly their jets, and not only just their self-defense, but the interoperability. So now they can interact with us. We work as partners in these different AORs, protecting maritime security, all that, right? So it's incredibly important work in my mind, and I love it for that, regardless of the very, very intense challenges we have time to time. But the payoff is worth it because what we do matters, and I know that every day.
Yeah. Lieutenant, let's go to you next.
Yeah, it's definitely very satisfying having this as a first assignment, getting to see the global impact really that a lot of the work has. Like I mentioned before, like I work with Italy and Norway, and so one of the things that I've heard from talks with my counterparts in Norway is, they're pretty close to one of our rivals, Russia, up over in the area up there, and so a lot of that is sort of ensuring that our partner nations have the tools to defend themselves and our other allies in that region. And so it feels immensely satisfying to have even a small part in providing for items that enhance global security and build those international partnerships. A lot of times, the CCM is the focal point of the US government. A lot of the folks that work in foreign military sales with our partner nations, the first person that they talk to on the US government side is us. Granted, they'll coordinate with other folks and other US government actors, but as far as acquiring the materials and services that they need, their go-to person is us. And it feels immensely satisfying, that the US Air Force would put the trust in us to be that sort of focal point to interact with our foreign partners and facilitate not just the foreign military sales aspect, the case administration aspect, but also an element of diplomacy as well, because we are the ones that are interacting day in and day out with a lot of our foreign partners. And I think that kind of relationship building, as John mentioned earlier, is also one of the really satisfying parts about working in this job.
And Mary, what do you say?
Well, for me, I'm very blessed to have two foreign liaison offices here at Wright-Patterson. And so what's satisfying to me is that the relationships you build here overflows into the relationships you have with ministries of defenses, general officers at the higher level in these countries. And it is a blessing, or it's just wonderful that a ministry of defense can pick up the phone and call you, or a general officer can pick up the phone and call you from another country. They have a lot of trust and faith in us that we can provide them the right answers. And if I never say no. I always say, let me work my magic. And they, can you work your magic? It's just very satisfying. It's very unique in the fact that we do have an impact on their day-to-day, work, and that they trust us for that type of action. So, and the culture, going over there and learning new cultures and being a part of that is just the most satisfying thing. And that and then AFSAC community is so helpful in helping each other out to explore other countries and do other things. So we have that ability to spread our wings. If anybody ever needs help, they'll come to us, So that's awesome. That's just a unique experience for me.
So I think we're just about to the end of our time, but before we close, I just want to give you guys all an opportunity. Is there anything that we forgot to talk about, or anything that you'd like to add or reiterate? And we'll go around, we'll start back with Mary this time.
Well, I think that what a lot of folks don't understand for a CCM aspect is that you go to acquisition and you come to FMS, throw everything out the window that you learned in acquisition and start fresh here, because it's something great to have under your belt. If you ever get to AFSAC, it's totally new, but once you learn it, you can go back to the acquisition world and have the ability to build that gap between AFSAC and the acquisition world program offices. Because I think a lot of us, the more connections you have with Area B, the acquisition world and FMS, you'll find that the relationships are wonderful and you can build along those. Because like Lieutenant said, he was thrown into something that we had classes on and it didn't pertain to FMS. So it's a whole new world. It's bright and it's entertaining.
Thank you. Lieutenant?
Yeah, and I had the benefit of first starting out with nothing really to throw out the window in the first place anyways. So I came in, blank slate, really eager to learn. One thing that I did realize was very different about what I expected about typical acquisitions work, at least from what I've talked with other coworkers and other officers, is that a lot of the work that we do at AFSAC is very experiential based as opposed to proficiency based. And so coming right out of undergrad, I was expecting to have, one singular task or project to manage that is, something that's difficult that I would have to think about or brainstorm day in and day out. Realistically, a lot of the challenges that we face at AFSAC are very simple the first time you do it, and then after that, it's very easy. But there's a million and one different things to do every time, and I've been here over 2 years, and I'm still encountering new problems. But if you encounter the same problem twice, then it's very simple. So for that part, I'm very thankful to have this as my first assignment, because it sort of forced you to be in that sort of broad-based learning aspect as well, and not just be very narrowly focused, but have a broad focus on all range of different issues.
Okay. And John, we'll close it with you.
I would just say that, this is my first stint in anything acquisitions, and I've heard that AFSAC kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, and maybe it's because it is so different from normal acquisitions and everything. But like I said, 20 years active duty, 4 years prior Air Force for public affairs, I've been on a lot of teams, and I came here knowing not very much about it. I cannot speak highly enough of the people at AFSAC at all levels of leadership, and how amazing we all work together. I never get people say, no, I don't have time. There are people who will help you, get you through this process. And then when you get to a point of proficiency, now it's your turn to turn around and help those others that are coming up, like the first lieutenant and other people. So, I love AFSAC. I hope I'm here for quite a long time. And if anybody out there is thinking about the career move, don't be a little nervous. It is challenging, but the support of the people here is amazing, and you're going to love it.
Well, on that note, we'll close it off. I appreciate everybody's time today, and thanks for helping us understand better what a command country manager does.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.